In this lesson, we're going to be looking at adding and subtracting fractions, but this time the denominators are not going to be alike, and so we're going to have to rewrite the fractions so that they have common denominators, because we can only add and subtract when the denominators are the same, because that makes the pieces the same size. In order to do this, you need to know how to make equal fractions. So if you have the fractions 2/7 and you want to make that into a fraction that means the same thing, that is equal to the same amount, we ask ourselves, what do we multiply 7 by to get 21? That would be 7 times 3. And whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So since I multiply times 3 on the bottom, I multiply times 3 on top, and 6/21 would be equivalent or equal to 2/7. 5/8. So here we have 8 and 48 as the denominator. That would be times 6 to get 48. So we have to multiply the top times 6. So that would be 30/48. 11 times 4 is 44. So we have to multiply the 3 times 4. And that would give us 12/44. Now these rewritten fractions are not going to be in simplest form, obviously, because now if we took this fraction and we simplified it, we'd be going back to this fraction. We're just making fractions that are equivalent. 2/5 equals something 45ths. 5 times 9 equals 45, so we're going to have to do 2 times 9 on the top. That would be 18/45. So we're going to be using that skill to rewrite fractions with common denominators. Here we have 1/6 plus 3/4. You will notice that the denominators are not the same, so we want the pieces to be the same size in order to add and subtract them together. That means the denominator has to be the same, because that tells us how many pieces something is divided into. So if you think about 12 and 4, and if you were to start counting by 6 and start counting by 4, 8, 12, 6, 12, 12 would be the first multiple that they have in common. So we're going to rewrite it with a denominator of 12. So if we choose 12 as our denominator, we have to think 6 times what equals 12? That would be times 2. So we have to multiply the 1 times 2, which is 2. 4 times 3 equals 12, so we have to multiply 3 times 3 on top. That would be 9. So we would rewrite that as 2/12 plus 9/12. We have 2 plus 9. Both are positive numbers. We added together, and it's simply 11/12. Now we have 2/7 plus 3/14. If I started counting by 7s, 7, the next multiple would be 14. So I know I can use 14 as my common denominator. I have to multiply 7 times 2 to get 14. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So that would be 2 times 2 equals 4. 3/14 is the same fraction. Now on the top, I have 4 times 4 plus 3 is 7. That would be 7/14. Both 7 and 14 are divisible by 2. That doesn't show it very good. It's divisible by 2. Oh, sorry. Not divisible by 2. Divisible by 7. That's better. And we would simplify that to 1/2. Now, they're going to get a little more complicated when one of them is positive and one of them is negative. So here we have a negative 5/6. So this negative sign, just think of this as a negative 5. Move it up there. So we have a negative 5 and a positive 1. But we do not have common denominator. If I were to start counting by 6, 6, 12, 18, 24. If I were to count by 8s, 8, 16, 24. So here's the least common multiple that they have in common. So my common denominator is going to be 24. 6, to rewrite 6 to 24, it's 6 times 4 equals 24. So we have to multiply the 5 times 4. That would be a 20. Remember, that's going to be a negative 20 because this negative sign makes that negative. For the 1/8, 8 times 3 equals 24. So we multiply 1 times 3. That would be 3/24. Now we have a negative 20 and a positive 3. So we have different signs. So we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the one with the greatest absolute value. And that would be a negative 17/24. And if you want to, you can just move that negative sign back down here in front of it. The negative sign here or the negative sign here, you can put it in either location. We usually just write it out in front like this, but we know that that means a negative 17. Here we have one fraction and one mixed number. So we could do this a couple of ways, but we're going to actually turn the mixed number into an improper fraction. To do that, we multiply 5 times 4, which is 20, plus 3. So that would be 23, and we keep the denominator fourth. So we have a negative, because there was a negative sign right here, negative 23/4 if we rewrite that as an improper fraction. So that gives us, there's our negative 3/10 and our negative 23/4. Now for common denominator, I know that if I count by tens, 10, 20. If I count by fours, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20, but the least common multiple there is going to be 20. So I can rewrite these with a denominator of 20. When I do that, 10 times 2 equals 20, so I have to multiply 3 times 2, and that would be a negative, so I wrote negative 6. 4 times 5 equals 20, so I have to go 23 times 5, and that would be a negative, see the negative sign right here, 115. Now, I have two negatives because if I add the opposite, I'm going to have a negative 115. So you can tell this is a negative number, this is a negative number, same signs, add and keep. So that would be a negative 121/20. And then to simplify that, if you take 121 and divide it by 20, you would get 6 wholes. 6 times 20 is 120 with one remainder, and that gives us our 1/20. And of course it's negative because we're adding two negatives. Same signs, add and keep. 3 3/4 plus 5/14. You could turn this into an improper fraction, and that would be 12 plus 3 is 15/4. Or you can use the mixed number and do it that way. So what I chose to do this time was to keep it a mixed number. And I'm just going to rewrite the two fractions. 4 and 14. I know the least common multiple for 4 and 14 is 28. So 4 times 7 equals 28. So I have to go 3 times 7, which is 21. 14 times 2 is 28. So I have to go 5 times 2, which is 10. So I rewrote the two fractions, but I went ahead and kept the mixed number because I have to just add the mixed number. It would just be 3 plus 0, which is easy. Now I have 3 wholes plus no other wholes, so I know I have a 3, and then I'm going to add the fractions, which is 21 plus 10 for the numerator, and we know that the denominator was 28. So 21 and 10 is 31. Now 31/28 is an improper fraction, so we have to take 31 and divide it by 28. That would give us one group, and when you subtract, you get 3. So 1 and 3/28, but we already had 3 wholes right here. So when we add that 1 whole to another 3 wholes, that gives us 4 wholes and 3/28. You can do the same thing by making your improper fractions. You're just going to have very large numbers. Now let's look at this with variables. In the denominator we have an 8n and we have a 4. So let's look at the number first. We have 8 and a 4, so if I were to count by 4s, 4, 8, we know that the least common multiple would be 8. But since there is a variable, I have to also include that unknown number. So my denominator is going to be 8n. So what do I have to multiply times 8n to get 8n? Well, I would just multiply that times 1. I don't have to multiply it times anything because I'm not rewriting that fraction. But let's look here at 4. What do I multiply times 4 to get 8n? First, I have to multiply 4 times 2 to get 8. But then I also have to multiply it times that n to get the n on the bottom, because 4 times 2 times n is 8n. So I have a 2n that I have to multiply the top by. And 3 times 2n would be a negative 6n. Now we have common denominator, so we could rewrite it. See this negative sign right here? That makes this a negative 3n. And we have learned that we can only combine what we call like terms. Well, right now we have a 3 minus 6n in the numerator and an 8n on the bottom. I cannot combine these two terms because they are not what we call like terms. They do not have the same variable attached. So that's actually as far as you can go with that one. Okay, here's our next one. We have a denominator of 5ab and 3a. First, we look at the numbers. We have a 3 and a 5. If I were to count by 5s, 5, 10, 15. If I were to count by 3s, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Here's my least common multiple is 15. So I know I'm going to have 15 in the denominator. Now I have to write every variable that I see. Well, they both share an a, so I can say, okay, they both share an a, but there's also a b present, so I have to put that. So I have to have in the denominator every variable that is represented up there. So they shared an a, so I wrote an a. There was also a b, so I wrote a b. Now, that made our common denominator 15ab. Let's see how that would work. So what do I have to multiply 5 by to get 15? That would be 5 times 3. The variables a times a, b times b are the same, so I don't have to do anything with variables, but I do have to multiply the top times 3. That would be 9. For the next fraction, we have 3a. Well, first I have to multiply the 3 times 5 to get 15. I already have the a, but I also need a b because the b was not here already. So that means I have to multiply the top times 5b, which would be a negative 10b. Now we have common denominator, and again, if you look, we have 9 minus 10b in the numerator, and we have 15ab in the denominator. These are not like terms. We cannot combine them, so we are actually finished at that point. Okay, 6 2/3 minus 3 1/4. We can either do this as mixed numbers, or we can turn them into improper fractions to do it. I'm going to keep them as mixed numbers. So if I look at the denominators, 3 and 4, the common denominator is 12. So when I rewrite these, I would have 6 still as my whole number and 3 as my whole number. What do I multiply 3 by to get 12? That would be times 4. So I multiply 2 times 4. That would be 8. Here it's 4 times 3. So I have to multiply this times 3. Now, I just subtract the whole number, 6 minus 3, which is 3. And I subtract the numerators, 8 minus 3. So that would give me 3. And then we have 8 minus 3 for the numerator. That would give us 3 and 5/12. 7 and 3/8 minus 7 and 1/2, or minus 4 and 1/2, I'm sorry. So let's rewrite this. Our common denominator is going to be 8ths. So our first one would still be 7 and 3/8. For the second one, I have to multiply times 4, and 1 times 4 is 4. Now this time we have, I personally like to see this visualized stacked together instead of horizontal. I like it vertical, because we're going to have to regroup, because we cannot go 4 minus, or 3 minus 4. That would give us a negative fraction, but we can't subtract it that way with fractions. So we're going to have to regroup. So what we're going to do is we're going to take away a whole. So if we take away a whole from the 7, that leaves 6 wholes. And we need a fraction that represents a whole. And since we have a denominator of 8, 8/8 is a fraction that represents the same thing as this whole that we took away. So we took away a whole, but we added a whole in the fraction. So you add 8 plus 3 together, and that rewrites our fraction as 11/8. So when you see this fraction right here and you're regrouping, all you have to do is add the numerator and denominator again together. 8 plus 3 is 11. So that gives us 6 and 11/8 minus 4 and 4/8. To me, that's easier to visualize when I do it vertical, but you can do it horizontal. There it is. So we took away a whole, made it 6. We added these two together. It became the numerator and kept the denominator. Now we have 6 minus 4, which is 2. And then we have 7 minus 4, which is 7. So 2 and 7/8. When you have a whole number and then you have a mixed number, we need to rewrite the whole number as a mixed number. I take away a whole, that would leave 6 wholes, and the fraction that equals a whole would be 3/3 this time because of the denominator 3 right here. We want to write a fraction with thirds. 6 and 3/3 is the same thing as 7 wholes. So we can rewrite it as 6 and 3/3 minus 6 and 1/3. When you subtract 6 minus 6 in the whole number, that becomes 0. 3/3 minus 1/3 is simply 2/3. When we have a variable, we have to get the variable by itself on the left side of the equation. So we want to move the 7, 1, and 1/3 on the other side. Since it's a positive, we want to do a negative 5 and 1/3 on both sides. So we would be adding a negative 5 and 1/3. We can either leave these as mixed numbers, or we can turn them into improper fractions. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. So here's you see the answer. So let's see what that would look like. So if I had negative 4 and 9/5, and I subtract 5 and 1/3, I could keep my mixed numbers, and I would have common denominator of 27. So that's negative 4, and I'm going to put 27 on the bottom. 9 times 3, so I have to go 5 times 3, which would be 15 27s. Keep 27 here, that would be 3 times 9, so I have to do 1 times 9, which is 9. Now I have two negatives, so actually I'm adding same signs, add and keep. So since they're both negative, we add a negative 4 and a negative 5. If you add the opposite, remember, same signs, add and keep. That would be a negative 9, and 15 plus 9 would be 24. Keep our denominator. Both of those numbers are divisible by 3, and when you divide both of those numbers by 3, you get your 8/9. Kinsey is making 3 desserts for a party. The recipe calls for 2/3 cup of sugar, 1 5/6 cups of sugar, and 2 3/4 cups of sugar. If she has 6 cups of sugar, how much sugar will she have left over? So first of all, we want to see how much sugar she needs to use. We have 2/3 plus 1 5/6 plus 2 3/4. This time we have 3 fractions that we're adding together. We have 3 and 6 and 4, and the common denominator for those 3 numbers would be 12. So if I rewrite this with a denominator of 12, that would be times 4. This would be times 4, so that's 8/12. 6 times 2 is 12, and 5 times 2 is 10. Then here, 4 times 3, so we do 3 times 3. I can add my whole numbers together. 2 plus 1 is 3. Then I have 8 plus 10 plus 9. 8 plus 9 is 17, plus 10 is 27/12. If I divide that out, 27 divided by 12 is 2. Multiply is 24. Subtract and get 3 would be 3/12. So I add 2 back to my 3. That would be 5 and 3/12. It said that she had 6 cups of sugar. How much will she have left over? So we want to rewrite 6 as 5 and 12/12. This whole plus 5 equals 6, but we need to have a denominator of 12ths. So now 5 and 12/12 minus 5 and 3/12 would be 5 minus 5 is 0. 12 minus 3 would be 9/12. And when that is simplified, it would be 3/4 of a cup. So all of this adding and subtracting the fractions came together into that recipe. Okay, good luck with adding and subtracting with uncommon denominators.